So I'm currently studying for my PhD with Jim King at the University of Leicester, and looking at emotion regulation. And today I'm talking about frustration, and frustration is not the main thing I'm interested in, actually. But when I did a study last year, beginning of last year, end of 2017, with a group of teachers, it became quite clear that frustration was something that was really salient in their emotional lives. It was the most discussed emotion. And that's what led me to writing a paper about it, to kind of investigate it in depth. And talking a little bit about that paper today. But you can see the picture of the smiling face here. It's not related to frustration whatsoever. That's a deliberate choice, actually. So I've chosen this picture for 3 reasons. The first reason I have chosen this picture of a smiling face is to start with some positivity. Because I think if you sit in a room for an hour and you only talk about frustration, there is the danger that you leave more frustrated than when you came in. So I definitely don't want that to be the case. So that's one reason. And the second reason I have chosen this smiling face is I think it's important to remember that even though we are focusing on frustration today, frustration is only one aspect of our emotional lives as teachers. And today we will see I will show you some quotes from teachers, but please remember their emotional lives are much bigger than that frustration. And fortunately, teachers experience much more positive emotions than they do negative emotions. Otherwise, we wouldn't be teachers, I think. So I think that's really important to remember, that these are real people, and this is just one aspect of their kind of experience that we're looking at. And the third reason I chose this picture is because maybe she is feeling frustration right now, and she's a very good actress. Okay? Maybe. So part of emotion regulation, one part of it is actually hiding or suppressing the way you really feel. So who knows? Maybe what face is telling us and what she's really feeling is very different. Okay? So I think that's a good setup for what I will talk about today. I have 3 goals today, so that we're all on the same page. I want us to understand what frustration is, or maybe a little more about what frustration is, and also what emotion regulation is as well. That's the first thing. And I think I then want to reflect, as a group, reflect on some kind of common classroom stresses, common things that make us feel frustrated in the classroom for teachers in Japan, and how we might deal with those. I'm aware that people feel frustration in all aspects of their teaching. So it's not just in the classroom. A lot has been written about frustrations with colleagues or institutions, but I think today we are just going to focus on the classroom. And then at the end, I'd like to analyse some reports of frustration and emotion regulation from the teachers that took part in my study. I think they had some really insightful things to say that have helped me to become less frustrated. So I hope that by doing that we can all learn something from their voices. And I am making some assumptions too. I hope that these assumptions are true for us all. So number 1, my assumption is that we all feel frustrated when teaching sometimes. If you do not feel frustrated, you are the wonderful magic teacher, and please teach me your secret, because I know that that's not me. I do feel frustrated sometimes, and I'm making that assumption today. I'm also making the assumption that frustration is a forbidden emotion. I think it's forbidden. I don't think we are supposed to feel it. We are not supposed to talk about it. And probably we are not supposed to show it in class. I'm making that assumption. And I think that, I think this is both implicit and explicit. So I think implicitly we feel as teachers we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't model that emotion for the students. But also we are told that. I think we are told that, especially in Japan. I used to work for a large eikaiwa chain, and I was told many, many times how I was supposed to be as a teacher. Not just what I was supposed to do, but what I was supposed to be, the person I was supposed to be. And I think that's true for a lot of contexts in Japan. And I think we have to be very honest and very non-judgmental, and that's today as well. If people are sharing their experiences of frustration, there is a danger that we can become judgmental, but absolutely we shouldn't. I think we all feel it. It's a natural feeling in this job, which is it's a job of relationships and a job of trying to get people to do things, right? Maybe you want them to do. So it's a very common experience. I think we here as well. It doesn't just mean we in this room. I actually think it means the tea salt industry as a whole. I think frustration does get spoken about in the break room, does get spoken about in the pub, probably in reflective practice sessions as well. All of those locations are great. I don't think it's bad that we talk about frustration in those places, but I do think we don't talk about it enough in formal places too. There's not enough literature about the experience. I think in teacher training, there is not enough spoken about frustration and how to deal with the emotional issues of teaching. So I think we need to have that kind of conversation. And number 4, I'm very sorry. There is no magical answer. There is nothing I can tell you today to make you feel like your frustration has vanished. But I do think if we can understand more about frustration and why we're feeling it and what are some useful ways to deal with it, then maybe we can reduce it. I do think that's true. And so that's the kind of goal for today. It's not necessarily to solve frustration, but to maybe have more information. Knowledge is power, and to have some different ways to think about it. Okay, everybody's okay? Cool. Cool. I'm going to talk about some of the theory. Now, emotion regulation, I'm sorry to say, is really, really, really meta-language heavy. Now, I have made the conscious decision today to not use meta-language much. I'm trying to keep it to a minimum because I think it can very easily overload the discussion. Okay? But if you are interested in the meta-language, all the references are there. You can go and find out more about these ideas for yourself. Today is, I think, a slightly simplified version, but I think it will work better for us. Right. So to start off, what is frustration? Anybody know? What is frustration? Why don't you, let's be interactive. Why don't you talk, just 1 minute, what do you think? What is frustration? Sorry, I'll have to... Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So... Thank you. Would anybody be willing to share an idea? What is frustration? Anything about frustration that you might think is true?
Okay.
Yeah, great.
So we were talking about how there might be this sense of lack of control, things are outside of your control, and if you feel like you can't make changes yourself, then you might feel frustrated.
Fantastic, you can take my job.
I was late.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a really salient factor. Something I'll talk about is control. Yeah.
In our discussion and then others, I heard around the word expectations kept coming up.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, especially as teachers, that's something we have to deal with. Expectations maybe not being met. I'll go through some different points about frustration. Before we even talk about frustration, I want to make something really clear, and that is that our emotions are not just inside us. Okay, they're actually they're constrained, socially constructed, if you will, built in the context that we are in. So any emotion that we experience in the classroom is very much dependent on the relationships that we have, where we are working, even government and society. Okay, I think that's a really important first step. So when I feel an emotion in Japan, maybe I wouldn't feel that emotion if I was teaching in the UK. Maybe I would feel a different emotion. Okay, I just want to make that really clear. But with emotions, they of course happen within us as well. You know, they're not just floating in the ether. And this is a really simple model for understanding our emotions. This is called the process model of emotions. We have a situation, something happens. We notice it, our attention is drawn to it. We appraise it, which means we evaluate it as being good or bad. And then an emotion starts for us. Okay. You know, you see a spider comes, you see it, you feel scared, and you jump. Right? It's a really simple way of imagining emotion, I think. Okay, and we can put it on this timeline actually. So just a classroom example. Okay, might be a really common one. The teacher is talking, and two students start talking, and the teacher notices it, and maybe he feels frustration. Okay, yeah, maybe. But maybe he doesn't feel frustration, maybe he feels happiness. Right? So it comes back to context. If you're in a class and your students never, ever talk, ever, you might be really, oh, finally, glorious. Yeah. So it comes to context and your relationships and things that are happening, right? As to whether you feel frustration or not. And frustration has, of course, been written about a little. In language teaching, not very much. Unfortunately, but there's more in general education. First thing to say is frustration is a low-level negative emotion. It's not actually a very powerful emotion. Anger, for example, is a very powerful emotion. If you feel anger, you have trouble controlling it, okay, I think, in a lot of cases. But frustration is more low-level. And in a way, that's the danger, because if we have it for a long time, it leads to other emotions which are stronger. It might lead to sadness or anxiety, anger. This is a very salient one for me, anxiety. You know, if I have a class which is very difficult and I feel frustrated by it, if I can't solve that frustration, eventually I feel like I don't want to go to that class. I start to get nervous before it. So definitely that's one of the reasons why dealing with frustration is important. As I said, there's not been much written about frustration in language teaching, but it comes up tangentially in papers, some papers. Neil Cowie wrote a paper in 2011, Jim King in 2016, and they talk a lot about the institutional factors, actually, rather than the classroom. There is some mention, but today we're going to think about the classroom in particular.